We've all seen those aesthetic videos set to the upbeat music that make changing your life look absolutely seamless. The voiceover goes, there was that one moment where I decided to change it all, and suddenly life looks amazing. But in reality, for most of us, it's not like that. It's scary and overwhelming. Caroline, there is so much for us to get into about career, identity, changing your life, and all things quarter life crisis. What do we need to know about you, your story, and what you do before we get into it?
For sure. So, as you met me today, I am a career coach. That isn't what I always did. I changed lane all on my own prior to this. So if we went back many moons ago, I used to work in advertising. I worked in creative agencies after I left uni, and I was making loads of different types of ads. I had what was on paper a very cool job. I would go to work on a campaign. There'd be the odd celeb in that, or you'd turn on the telly and there'd be the work that you made, or you go to the cinema and before the film, there's something you made. And on paper, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then over the course of, well, a lot quicker than I always like to admit, I was going, I don't think this is right. But I stayed in it. I stayed in it. I stayed in it for years. I had lots of people around me going, oh, you're really good at this. And that whole time I sat there going, I don't necessarily think this is right for me. But did the thing I think lots of us do when we have those feelings and basically just try to shove them down, push them away as hard as possible. And then I went through COVID like we all did. And ended up in lockdown on my own, sitting in my flat for months on end on furlough with nothing but time. And I think when you have lots of time, you are then prone to kind of think, to analyze. And I had that moment where I went, I don't think this is right. And I think I have to do something about this. And that was 6 years ago now. And it's started a career pivot and a career change into working in career coaching. The journey to that wasn't that I woke up one day and went, I really want to be a career coach. It didn't feel like that. It was going, actually, I think I need some help. I actually just wanted to do anything else, but I couldn't find anyone to help me. I couldn't find anyone out there who, if I'm honest, wasn't giving kind of advice that felt a bit like my mum. Like my mum is a great gal. She's lovely. But is she necessarily the person who knows what it's like to be a young person in the world of work? No. And so I suddenly realized when I was talking to friends, loads of people were going through this on their own, having no way of knowing how to navigate it and finding it incredibly stressful and going and online it looks as you say in that quote, like it looks really easy and actually the reality is so different. And so what I did was suddenly go, do you know what, actually I'm really good with people and loads of people are going through this and they need help. I need help. What if I just became that person that I needed? And so fast forward 6 years through a load of free training and a big old journey that got me to where I am today. I now work as a career coach and I basically specialize in helping young professionals and young people feel in control of their careers, and whether that looks like making the work you do feel better and enjoying the day to day more, whether it is helping you build a life outside of work, if work is just a thing you do, or whether it's making big changes and big choices in your careers. Kind of my job is now I get to spend all day talking to people about work, which I think some people go, that sounds awful. You talk about work all day. But actually I'm deeply passionate as someone, I'm deeply passionate about being someone who people have to support them through figuring out this career stuff. And then so that's probably the thing you should know about me is I love talking about work, as uncool as that sounds.
Amazing. And I love how kind of in hindsight, it all sounds very candid, right? That you just like suddenly this thing falls out the sky and you're like, yeah, no, that's me. Like, and here you are 6 years later. It's very easy to skip over the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just be like, yeah. So it's just yeah, whatever. And you almost kind of you don't give yourself the flowers, either positively or negatively, for where you get yourself. Sorry, or how you got yourself to where you are right now. So how does someone become a career coach? Because like there's going to be a decision making process, and B, like, okay, you made the decision, right? That's my thing for now. Let's say.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
how do you kind of like you've got this gap of like the idea and then you have the execution of like where you are today. What was in the gap?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Oh, particularly also with career coaching, because career coaching as a profession is an interesting one where career coach isn't technically a protected title. And so what I mean by that is if you were going to become a therapist, being a psychologist, being a psychiatrist is a protected title, meaning that you have to have done a load of training and you only can get to call yourself that if you've done that training. Career coach isn't like that. So technically, anybody can turn up on the internet and call themselves a career coach, which happens. And I will say, it's, some of the advice I would argue, I'm biased. I would argue is slightly dodge at times. It wasn't the path I wanted to take. So where I was sitting there going, okay, I didn't know what career coaching was. Frankly, it had never been something I'd had access to. And as I had this kind of, to use the phrase that you would use online at the moment, career crisis, where I basically went, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, met someone who was a career coach, and he was instrumental in kind of helping me unpick and unpack what I was doing. And I went, oh, what you do is quite helpful. And actually, I think other people could benefit from this. But as I say, because like anyone can call themselves a career coach, I could have at that point just turned up and gone, actually, this is what I want to do. For me, that ethically feels off. I wanted to I wanted to have at least some knowledge beyond me going, I've trained some teams, that will probably be fine. Like I wanted to ground myself in that. So the route that I took is I firstly did a piece of online training, which I did an online certification, which is something I always recommend for people if they are trying to change careers. I go, what's the like easiest way you can test the thing that you think's interesting? Like test your idea, run your experiments. So like for me, I went, okay, I'll do an online course because I could do it from home because we're all at home. It was relatively low investment and it was the way to test, do I actually think this is something that I like? I got to the end of that and went, yeah, good, confirmed two things. One is that I like it. Two is I definitely still don't feel qualified to go and actually talk to someone about it. And so what I then did is I then went to going, okay, what's the highest level of qualification I can have? And I ended up doing a postgraduate certificate at the University of London through Birkbeck, which then turned into me doing a master's at the same time, and then ended up then going, right, now I feel qualified to be a career coach. But throughout all of this, I'm also still working in advertising at this point. So there wasn't like a quit the job and just figure it out thing, which is the other narrative that I think you see quite a lot of, which I don't necessarily subscribe to. I don't subscribe to the quit and the pressure will make you figure it all out bit. So my version of that journey is kind of a longer version to it. If you can do it, amazing. I don't think everybody should do it. But yeah, it was a longer journey into it than necessarily it had to be, but it was the one that made me feel most comfortable
Yeah.
with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think like people don't necessarily realize that, or it's not as obvious to people as I would maybe say it is around, like you can straddle the two things to start off with, like
Mm,
getting similar to yourself. So during, in a previous life, when it back in those COVID days, I was a personal trainer, and for so
mm,
long I really struggled with like but especially through that like kind of like lockdown period. And it's like, okay, well, we try and pivot online, do this, do that. I did not know enough. I wasn't old enough to truly, really understand what was going on either.
mm,
Very
mm,
impressionable. And it wasn't until kind of I had that opportunity, I went back into like employed work to be like, okay, well, this is paying the bills. So it
mm,
just removes that stress. And I kind of just sit there and I can straddle the two things. And I had an opportunity to go back into work. New gym opened in town, and then I kind of just sort of took the leap a little bit
mm,
into doing it. And I did have that safety net of like, oh, I could go back and work in that job, and I can still get myself some hours. I didn't like have my notice in immediately. I was fortunate and worked very, very hard to be like, I actually never had to go back. But given the nature of that role, I basically had that safety net there of I can top up the bank account if
mm,
I need
mm,
to, but I also have it very much within my power that I don't necessarily need to do that if I don't want to.
mm,
And yeah, it was kind of well, it was one of those ones where it's like the rest is history, and you know, a year later, 2 years later, that's still was still something that I was doing. And I do like the idea of like almost straddling those things. Like see a lot online around like 5 to 9, you get two 5 to 9 a day, like and subscribing to the idea of like, okay, well, what one thing could you do to kind of push you towards that dream outcome for you? What might be like, it might be a piece of training, it might be a qualification, but that ability to kind of straddle okay, my employed work, the 9 to 5, whatever you want to call it, and
Yeah.
have that thing outside of it that you do work on to kind of push the needle and not necessarily a get out plan, but you have that there should you need it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find you had to be quite patient with it? Because I think that's partly maybe where some of this narrative of going, you need to go all in is like, I think we live in a world of immediate gratification now. And I think people try and turn that on careers as well of going, right, everything has to change. It has to change overnight. Whereas, as you say, when you're doing that straddling piece, and yes, it sounds like you had that safety net. I think there's also a bit of we have to be quite patient with the timeline of going, it might take a bit longer. You might have to manage yourself a bit.
So in that particular situation, no, I didn't have
Mm,
motivation, but the input that I put in to make that work,
mm,
like, I don't know if I'd be willing to do it again
yeah, interesting.
because, like, I don't know if I'm necessarily willing to sit there and kind of fall asleep with my dinner in my hands and like be
Yeah.
nodded off and then wake up at 3 a.m. with
Mhm,
cold dinner all over me. I don't really
mhm.
know if I'm necessarily willing to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
But like that's a level that I push myself. I went into that gym every day for a minimum of 4 hours for 6 weeks straight, like 7 days a week. And it wasn't just that, it was the online push as well that kind of backed it up. And then almost being like really on the front foot with all of that. I would
yeah,
probably say that, that meant I didn't have to be patient, but I would be
yeah,
very, very like, I don't think I would do that again because that was
yeah,
very hard and
yeah.
a lot of
At the time, what
the wayside.
at the time, what made it feel worth it?
So that particular job that was the safety net was a bank hospital porter at the start, well, tail end of 2021. So you can imagine what that sort of thing is. It's still this big COVID thing
Yeah,
that is a bit scary and protected this, but like, and if you go here, you can't go there. And like, to be honest, like I really struggled with the environment and the people that, especially in my particular department that I worked with, I really struggled. And
yeah, yeah,
that was kind of the fuel to get out of it. And I think there's two ways
yeah.
you can look at it is like gun to the head mentality, you can make it work, almost like that sort of hustle culture, and you sort of like you're
Mm,
driven on that like dirty fuel, if that makes sense.
mm,
So more of like get away rather than go towards. And then I kind of got into that space and I'm like, yeah, okay, well I'm okay. Like everything's all good. And then, I had to do like a couple of hours here and a couple of hours there just to kind of stay on the books. And then end up in a position where I got a letter through the post saying, we're terminating your contract because you haven't worked within such time. But then I'm like, I didn't need to. So
mm.
that was like, okay, well, that's kind of a cool metric to be like, my safety net's now gone, but I've proved over the last 3 months I don't need it.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. You fired yourself, essentially.
Then we got myself fired by the NHS for
Nailed it.
all on this thing. I didn't get fired. You come up against commands, you get struck off the system, just to make that very abundantly clear, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think in my work and also in my life, like we talk about with change that you either have push factors or pull factors, and best change has a combo of both. It sounded like those push factors were quite strong for you, but I think you have to have one or the other to be able to pull you through it. Because as you say, it's hard making change in any form of your life is hard, and that applies to everything, right? It's hard to if you wanna lose weight, that's hard. If you wanna learn a musical instrument, that's hard. If you wanna run 5K or then suddenly why is everyone running a marathon? Like, if you wanna do that, that's hard. Like, it's all hard, and I think what's interesting is careers, sometimes we don't allow ourselves the space to go, "Yeah, actually, this is gonna be difficult. It'll be worth it. It'll 100% be worth it, but it takes the training hours in the same way that it would for everything it would for everything else, and you have to have that thing that pulls you through it, that makes you go, "Actually, what's on the other side of this is worth it." And that'll either be because I'm building something that I'm really excited about, or frankly, I'm not gonna be here anymore, and that'll be worth it.
Yeah. And it depends on kind of like what gets you going. And I think certainly from observing it, the whole I don't want to be in this situation anymore is probably a more of a motivating factor than most of us would kind of want to let on.
Mm,
rather than like, I'm actually pursuing this thing that I'm really passionate about. And I've now got an opportunity to kind of like jump from corporate mothership into
mm,
this thing that
mm,
is mine and I'm incredibly passionate about. And that might be
mhm.
career coaching, that might be nursing baby otters back to health.
Dream job.
Yeah. I don't know where that's come from, by the way.
I don't know, I like it though, let's do that.
Like it's just mad extremes, like whatever like
Yeah.
juices kind of juices you up. And I think like I often kind of come back to and I talk about this with a lot of guests, like the almost like, what do you want? Like what do you want? What does the future look like for you? And I think like that is a question that's so abundantly, what's what I'm looking for here? Is so like banned about so much.
Mm,
And I certainly think, I can talk about it from a 20 something, late 20 something perspective these days. And it's a question that's asked all of the time. Like whether I'm
mhm,
asking myself it, I'm getting asked it, I'm asking my friends it, like, well, what do you want? And I think it's such a powerful thing. And like obviously in your kind of line of work, that's a question is gonna come up a lot.
mm,
So for someone who's really struggling with this kind of identity, or like knowing of what they want to do, who they want to be, and where they want to go,
mm.
how would you, again, light touch, because I appreciate that's kind of your bread and butter.
Yeah, yeah, that's all right.
Like, what is your like what sort of questions or processes would you start walking people
Mm.
through to kind of really move them towards that clarity that they're looking for?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's such an important one, and what I often say to people is until you have that clarity of what you want and what you need, it's very hard to then look at all the changes you can make because there are so many options. There are tens of, even just in a career perspective, there are tens of thousands of different types of occupations in this country. And as we are all watching the world change before us, there are more jobs being invented now that none of us have ever heard of. There is so much possibility. And that is an incredible thing until you don't know what you want. And then suddenly that's the most overwhelming thing in the world. And then you couple it with the really encouragingly and well intended thing that everyone says to you, where they go, well, you could do anything. And you're like, great, that's huge. And so what we do is we dial it back to that question. And there are levels to that question, right? There's kind of what I term as kind of the you and piece of it all. And that's thinking about things like, what role do you want work playing in your life? What does success mean to you? Values wise, what's important? What do you want to be living in alignment with? What is it that truly motivates you? What would actually make the work you do feel worth it? Also, what is it that we need from our work to make it feel like it's kind of adding to who you are, to that identity piece? How do we feel like work is kind of building you into a Harvey that you want to be? What does that look like? But there's also then, if you think about, we spend a third of our lives at work, we spend an awful lot of time there. We also have to take that into a slightly more granular place of going, okay, if you're going to spend so much time there, what do you want to be doing? And that's about going, okay, if you look at your life now, what do you want more of? What's stuff that you're like, either I'm good at this, or I find it interesting, or it's a strength, or it's a skill? Like, what is it that we want to kind of keep and maybe amplify? What is stuff that you're like, this is new? I want to bring it in. I want to learn it. It's something that's interested me, but it was never my main thing. It was a side project I did. It's the thing that I look up online. It's the thing I read 85 Reddit threads on a week. Like, what is the stuff that we want to be bringing in? And then also, what's the stuff that you're like, well, I'm going to make a change. I get to leave this here. I get to leave this bit behind, as we've touched on those kind of push factors. Making a change, one of the trade-offs of the effort that it takes can be that you just don't have to do some of the stuff anymore. You get to leave it in this chapter. And then underneath all of that is kind of what I would term as real life. So how much do you want to earn? Where do you want to work? What do you want your hours to look like? If you've got goals for yourself in kind of broader life, whether, I don't know, you want to have a family, you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, you want to be going on 2 holidays a year, whatever is important to you, what does that look like? And I think the start of working out what you want is being very honest with yourself about all of those things. And there's no shame and there's no judgment in wanting anything. You're allowed to want whatever you want for yourself. But for me, I go own it, because the minute you own it and you accept it, you can start to build your life by design, and you can start to design a life that gives you those things. And suddenly, when it comes to, if we put this in a career perspective, that gives you a very quick filtering system where suddenly you can look at jobs, you can look at career paths and have something to kick against of going, am I going to be able to meet those things? But I think there's that starting point. It has to be that honesty, and it also has to be that clarity, awareness, acceptance that who you are and what you want is going to change. So it's brilliant that you're asking that question a lot, but I would imagine you today probably has a different answer to that than if I'd met you at 22.
Yeah.
You then probably would have had a different answer.
Yeah.
You a year ago might have had a different, and that's okay. Because in the same way that we expect change in other areas of our life to be hard, we also expect ourselves to change and grow in other areas of our lives. You know, we change in our relationships, we change in our friendships, we grow as a person in our hobbies and our interests. Yet for some reason, we all think that work is the thing that we're like, right, nailed it. I do one thing now and I have to be the same person. It has to be the same level of interest for the next 40 years. Of course, it doesn't. If you change as a person, there's a high likelihood what you need from your working life, that thing that you do for a third of it, that might need to change too, because it might not fit as well as like bought a jacket 5 years ago, it might not fit. The career you chose 5 years ago, it also might not fit. That's okay. If you accept that, you can do something about it. But you have to accept that and then go, right, what do I want? And be open and honest with that. Because if you do that, you'll start to build something that's really exciting, I think. But as I say, I'm a woman who talks about work all day, so I would find that exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like you said there, I think you summed it up perfectly around like there's just kind of these endless possibilities, probabilities, and things that are coming up that you don't know that you don't know are things yet. But if you were to go on to Indeed or wherever, insert place where you might find a job here,
Uh-huh. Mhm.
you're like, what's that? Like, what? What is
Mm.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Exactly. That's the point. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. So I can't give you an example of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, like an AI trainer, for example, someone who like
Yeah, great
trains
example.
AI like language bots, like, that's a thing. That's a very big thing. And, I even like very off topic, but I even heard the other day that the chat GPT says a lot about, quite often brings up the word delve in terms of like how it brings up in the language model. Now, typically in the UK, in the Western world, we don't really use the word delve an awful lot.
Yeah.
But you go to where they programmed the language models is West Africa,
Interesting.
and they seem to use that word quite a lot.
Delve a lot.
But it has come to a point where you or I would say would start to say the word delve quite a lot more,
Yeah.
purely
Yeah.
because we've been picked up, and now the master has been trained by the apprentice around
Yeah.
how it is. And like in general conversation, like the word delve comes up a hell of a lot more because AI has trained us to say it, because it's trained
That's so interesting.
by because it's a more common word by the person that trained it initially. In
That is so it's a not to take us on this entire tangent because we can absolutely go there, but, like, it's the same of things like when we're looking for AI writing, if I'm looking for it in, cover letters or CVs and stuff, there are certain stock phrases that no one would tend to use, and things like it uses things like "at the intersection of," "I operate at the intersection of this," which your face is, "Oh, why would you use that in a conversation?" We would rarely use it in written language, but it is a really common phrasing that comes up, and it's such a good example of, right, of the world is really shifting and changing around us, and that even in terms of kind of how it shows up in linguistic conversations that you wouldn't necessarily, we're not consciously doing it. It's fascinating, but as you say, that, yeah, that as a job is a really good example of someone now has to go, right, we don't use delve here. We've got to do something else.
Definitely. And we, like, even if, kind of on that topic of AI, whenever I'm reading applications, comms and stuff like that, and I'm just like, N dash, things like
Yeah.
that sort of language that you're like, would someone of your age use that? And I'm like, I don't, that's not to me. I'm like, if you send me a CV full of N dashes, I'm probably out.
Yeah.
But that's,
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah, no, I'm with you. One of my favorite phrases in life is word salad, and it's when it turns up as an absolute piece of word salad, and I'm like, this says it's got a lot of words, but none of those have created anything of meaning to it. And I completely get it. I'm not an anti AI person, and I think it has lots of merits, it has lots of values, but you do have to be mindful of it. You have to be mindful of how you use it, and that's a really good example of that, of where if it removes the critical thinking of going, actually, would I talk like this? Does this sound like me? Is it delivering what I want? And we just go, here it is, it wrote it. That was quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it that helpful, TBC?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important to be like, these tools are available. Like, let it help you do the heavy lifting
Mm,
and let it help with ideas. Like,
yep.
I did use a different AI bot the other day, and I'm like, well, actually, like, considering that it is Friday, my brain is fried out of my ears,
Mm,
and you've actually made like helped me kind of like start to think a little bit. If that, which sounds
yeah.
weird, like,
No, no.
kickstarts that process a little bit. Like, just like, I'm tired, but you've helped do some of the heavy lifting here. Like, it's little things like that where it's great, but when it replaces, something like a cover letter or a CV, which is ironically at a critical intersection of a job application, like,
Mm,
it seems such a shame to kind of, like, that's the foot you put forward.
yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. There's an irony in that, right? Of at the time where it's most important to make a first impression, we're letting something else do it for us. You are quite literally going into those moments to try and sell you, and you're not using the version of it that comes for you. And as I say, I don't think it's I'm with you on I think it is right to use it. I think everyone should be using it. I think in and sometimes that's a controversial thing to say because some people don't operate from that school of thought. Some people are in a place of going, I wish I could, I could wish I'd turn the whole thing off. I'm not unaware of the environmental impact of using these things. Have I guess just the angle I take on it with particularly the work I do is I think all of us have to learn to use it because in the same way of if you think about when letters changed to emails, you had lots of doctors who were like, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that." Okay, that's great. But in 2026, are you going to be the person who's still sending letters? No, probably not. So I think all of us have to unfortunately learn a baseline level. Otherwise, you will get eaten up by it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's better to work with it than against it at this stage based on the signals that we're getting. But I think it's so important to retain that critical thought, particularly around kind of stuff of trying to understand your sense of self. I think it's important for you to maintain that and understand kind of it can give you ideas like AI will be able to sift through those tens of thousands of careers and it'll always know more careers than I do, and I'm a careers professional. It will always know because it has encyclopedic knowledge that I as a human brain can't quite get to, and that's okay, I never will. But we can use it as part of the work and then critically analyze kind of what it does and what it means for us. But it's definitely changing. I think it's changing every conversation in all areas of life. But it's interesting of how often it comes up even without any of us meaning to. I think that's how present it is in all of our minds, whether we mean it or not.
Yeah, definitely. And like even like the like image creation capability, like
Hmm.
like opens up something that I could copy and paste a picture of myself and animate me into a character. Like, I would have to have all sorts of software
Mm,
to produce that level of and skill set to produce
yeah,
that level of work. But I can whack that into ChatGPT or Gemini, and
yeah.
within a few minutes, I've got something that I physically couldn't create myself purely
Yeah, it's
with it.
astonishing, isn't it? It's like when I was working in advertising, like one of the campaigns we made was this animated building. I was working for a pretty well-known trainer company, and we were doing basically there's an animated build of all the pieces of the trainer going together, and that took I think about 8 weeks of someone full time to put together. Now, and I haven't use case tested this, but I might do when I have a spare time in the week. You could put that into AI, it'd probably build it max in an afternoon going through some iterations. Like, that is astonishing and, concerning on some levels and also just astonishingly impressive. But I think it's interesting of, like, when you're trying to if you are building your own thing, like, it can make you the most insane podcast artwork I would imagine, really fast and, like, 95 options, which otherwise you'd have to pay someone shed loads to do. So It's amazing in that respect. What it does for those roles is an entirely different conversation, and I, as I say, I'm not unaware of that because there are, as with everything, there are trade-offs with all of this. All the things that are amazing have a negative, but the world of work is changing, and we're all within it and slightly kind of holding onto our roller coaster, going, "I wonder where this next turn's coming."
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, ironically, I had 0 points about AI on my in my notes.
Yeah,
So, how many points? Before we got into the record, one of the things you're like, "Oh, I'm a yapper," and I'm like, "Okay, cool, that's fine." I'd write loads of notes, so I've got like a bit of like almost like business to get through, and we've had a 10-minute chat about AI, which is
see, this is what happens when you hang out with me. This is what happens.
amazing. So when I was planning the episode and looking at like kind of I typically get people on and I'll go through your content and kind of pick through things and ask you, and it brings out sort of like topics and we can build on things that you come in you come and talk about. Yesterday you put in the most perfect post and I'm like I was going through all of these things, pulled up these points and I was like I'll have to delete these because this is like the North Star that we're going to work with. And like you mentioned this kind of like lightning bolt aha moment
Mm,
of kind of building off what we were just talking about
mm,
regarding which is a really corporate word, which building off of obviously what we were just talking about
mm.
in terms of like deciding what you want and kind of these, aha moments around your thing and what's next. And it just suddenly kind of hits you. Firstly, where do you kind of think these preconceived ideas of divine intervention are paving the way for these answers to just kind of like drop out the sky and into your lap?
It's an interesting one because there's a lot of literature around this in academia. We would call it kind of this notion of having a career calling. It comes from the religious sense of it. That's kind of where that comes from, but it has grown into being a term in itself. And some people have that. Some people have that feeling of going, I'm meant to be doing this. I feel called to this. It has, it is that sense of purpose. That is often the terminology that would come up around it. And they feel that that is, in terms of work, that's the thing that they're meant to be doing. I think what's interesting with it is and this is my personal viewpoint of, I think it gets overplayed how often those things happen. And I think there is a lot of pressure that people put themselves onto to go, well, I haven't found my thing. I need to find my thing. They often have that feeling of, similar to your story of going, I know this isn't necessarily right, but I'm building towards something. It's like lots of people go, I know this isn't right, but they have no idea what lives on the other side of that. I think where callings are interesting is having that sense of calling can make that feel quite reassuring. It can help us meaning make towards that, help us kind of tell that story of going, this is what I was meant to do. As I say, for me, I don't necessarily think that those big aha moments happen as often as maybe the online world would like to tell us that they do. Or they don't, or they do happen, but they don't happen as seamlessly as I think people would like to make it out that they do, as to that quote that you read at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that, that this whole thing, this podcast, where I want to take it over, like, coming months, years, however long,
Let's go years, aim big.
like it was born out of my realization that, you know, I'd kind of come to again, as time goes on, I start to look at it maybe a little bit differently, but I come to this position where it was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing the same career, having the same conversations. Like, I have such a calling to work with people on a deeper level than I just ate too many biscuits and can you help me do more squats? Like,
Mm,
important. Don't get me wrong.
mm,
Less so about the biscuits, but the actual, like, the real change isn't just done on squats and protein. There's some deeper work. And, the more I kind of do stuff like this and talk to certain people, get different opinions, like, for context, I've obviously got you on today who's as a career coach. Last time, in my most recent episode, I had someone who does like shadow work and inner child work,
oh, interesting.
which is so interesting. And then tomorrow, I've got another record with some old friends of mine who got in the UK news for just upping sticks, moving to Greece, living a significantly higher quality of life, and their monthly outgoings are significantly less.
Mm.
Like they live a cheaper, higher quality life
Mhm.
in Greece, and how they do that.
Mm.
They're digital nomads. They don't have to be in the office or logged on to Teams or Slack by
Mm. Mm.
morning, and show up to countless Zooms and Teams and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like going through these things, and all of these kind of, I'm always making sure it all kind of relates back to the idea of changing lanes, but having these conversations and getting these different perspectives.
Mm.
But I think it's super important to, like, it allows you to have this kind of like this really nuanced view of where you want to go with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in that, you were saying about how, like, in that moment you were like, I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore. I'd imagine, but I'd be curious to how this sits with you. Like, in that moment, I imagine that was quite confronting. And often we often have that moment where it turns up. It turns up. What I often think is that it turns up because of every time you had a client session and you were like, great, well, that's another program done. Right, on to the next one. And however many hours you were doing, all the time through that, it all starts to compound. And I often think kind of, I imagine if you haven't seen this and you're listening to Google this, of that image of kind of the brain being like an iceberg and there's only a little bit that's above the surface and so much of it is that unconscious below the water. I often think these moments where we go, can I swear on this?
Yes, so far.
Great. Those moments where we go, shit, something has to change. For me, that often is a sign of there's an accumulation that's kind of been growing up and bubbling up towards the top of the water. And that moment is where it peaks the surface. But often I think those feelings have been present normally for a lot longer than we're necessarily giving ourselves credit for. I think sometimes that's also where those aha moments, I think they do a disservice to it. It makes it feel quite random. And it's like, it's not random. It's an accumulation of all the experiences and feelings that you've had to this point. And you go, oh no, something's not right here.
Definitely. And I think maybe the way that I would look at that is, instead of it being an iceberg, think of it as a volcano.
Mm.
There's yeah, there might be a little bit of smoke coming out the top of the volcano, but that's pretty standard. It happens all the time. We need to let off steam every now and then, but like, there are a lot of rumblings deep below the surface before that volcano explodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And once it's exploded, it's hard to put it back in.
yeah, the Pandora's box of changing your life is like, or changing your fucking life, as I sometimes call it. Like, it's sometimes you really, have these moments. I'm like, I wish I could put that back in. I wish I could put that back in the box,
Mm.
but you can't. Unfortunately, these things are quite messy when you crack them open. Kind of approach with caution. But I'm also not sitting here saying I wish I'd never done it.
Mm. Mhm.
When I've kind of like, picked that metaphorical scab, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you just can't stop bleeding. Like, sometimes you're like, oh my God, what have I done? But fundamentally, like, you need to do that. You need to understand that, like, your, however you want to call it, the universe, your subconscious, whatever, a higher calling is trying to tell you something, and it comes out. And I think a lot of people kind of have those murmurings,
Mm.
those little tremors, to kind of go back to the volcano analogy,
Mm.
and they get ignored and suppressed and kind of just put off as having a bad day, and we never get that opportunity to truly kind of like feel it, honor it, and have
Mm.
that moment to be like, yeah, okay, well, we really need to, like, this is actually a bit more of a thing than I would like it to be.
Yeah. Do you think do you think the age that you decided to change things has an impact on your ability to do it? So because you were, if you look at the whole of your working life earlier on in your life than say someone who's 40 with kids, do you think it feels easier to have done it at that stage than later on?
That's yes and no, because you look at the person who's older, you've got that life experience, you've got those miles in the tank, you've got that wisdom that, I mean, unless you're an absolute idiot, you're not going around and kind of harvesting that wisdom, harvesting that, these things that you might learn along the way, and you kind of get the bit of lay of the land. And, within that experience comes, understanding and nuance and or whatever you want to call it.
Mm.
But then to make those changes, you've got a hell of a lot more responsibility. You've got the kids, the house, the dog, the partner, all of this to really upset that status quo. Doesn't I don't like, but then I'm also like, you then don't have to live in that prison of I hate whatever this is for.
Mm.
Contrary to that, when I did it, okay, yeah, I don't really have any dependencies. You know, like if shit really hit the fan at that particular point in my life, I could probably shrink down life to very, very, like if it really
Mm.
got that bad, it could be shrunk right down. But like for me, it was my first big like identity change.
Yeah.
I'd grown up in it, and
Yeah.
like zero skill set to kind of do it, like to understand what was going on. I opened that box and I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it's kind of something that I knew of, and
Mm.
I can look back now and I could see those sort of like those tremors and those warning signs.
Mm. Mm.
You don't necessarily need to act on it. So this kind of happened at the start of December in 2023. But,
Mm.
I could go back to, a few weeks beforehand, we had a like trip of a lifetime to Dubai.
Amazing.
And, people have their thoughts and feelings on Dubai. I personally love it. Like for a place, even if you go there and it's not your sort of thing, you can look around and you'd be like, this is a place for winners. This is a place
Mm.
who people don't play small. And it makes you realize how much of your life you're playing incredibly small.
Mm.
Now, it doesn't mean you have to go and build a mega city in the middle of the desert. I'm not saying that anyone
Yeah.
has to go and do that, but it made me really kind of made me realize that you're playing small. Like there's something in
Yeah.
there that's you're playing really, really small.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
before that, so in that previous summer, I'd done so like I said, I love coaching people, helping people, but for me, it has to be on like a really profound level, like to really kind of scratch that itch. That's
Yeah.
probably a wound that I need to work on away from all of this. But that, I had that situation where, I did a life transformation coaching program where
Mm.
I got qualified,
Mhm.
and the coach who taught it, he's someone I'd worked with a long time. Like the process is the same process that he used. He went away, got it like certified with the Institute of, I was going to say marketers. It's not marketers at all. Coaches and mentors. Some really, 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 really cool project. Like I kind of saw that kind of get incepted, and then
Mm. Awesome.
reiterate, and then I managed to get on and do it myself, and I loved it. I
Mm.
absolutely loved it because you start working with people who on that deeper level, which is what I've always wanted, right?
Yeah.
I then really struggled to use it because I'm in a gym setting. People
Yeah.
want squat
Yeah.
protein, which is fine. That's what they've signed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I almost start to alienate my client base because I start talking about mindset and asking yourself these questions. And I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And they're not interested because they don't care. That's
Yeah, it's not what they're there for.
which
It's
is,
like me at a dinner party. I'm like, "How's work?" And they're like, "No."
which is completely fair because they didn't sign up for it. Like, and that's on me. I've pissed a lot of people off. I probably upset quite a few people too in the process. Like it's one of those things that you need to have a, I can sit there and be a hindsight, be like, well, this is exactly what I did wrong. But, fundamentally, that was also a thing of like, okay, I don't need to do anything about it now, but I need to be like, this is something I'm clearly passionate about. How do
Mm.
I build an arm to the business? Do I start signing some new clients? Where all I purely work with them is mindset. I don't care about how many steps you've done or what your protein intake's been over the last 7 days. Because fundamentally, that's not going to change what's in here. It's
Yeah.
with your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like things like that, where it's all very well. I can sit here and be like, well, actually, this time I would do this, like because cool. Of course you can. Of course you can look back on something that happened
Mm.
3 years ago and be like, yeah, I would do it differently now. Of course you can.
Mm.
It's really easy to do, but like for me, that was probably one of my things where I look at my journey and you have these things, like listen to these murmurings before they
Yeah.
get out of control. Like they're not to be scared. There's nothing to be scared of. but you also don't need to necessarily do anything too crazy about it straight away.
Yeah, and it's exactly that, and I think change scratching those itches and making the change so that they don't live under the surface, and when they live under the surface eat you up inside. That need can be met in a whole variety of ways. As you say, if you look at Dubai, like, we don't have to go to the work and life equivalent of building a mega city. Like, it can be of going, actually, as your example, do you build out a different part of your business? Is it, when I work with clients, sometimes we go, is it that you need to do a course and actually just really engaged in this? Is it that you need to start volunteering? Is it that you need to work on a side project for yourself, kind of testing what it feels like to scratch that itch? Because you might test it in a small way and go, oh, do you know what? Actually, that was enough. And that's okay. There's no judgment with that. You might test it and go, oh, there's something bigger here. Okay, what next could I do with it? But I think there's something really powerful in what you said of really listening to that. I often talk to people about the importance of honoring that part of you that wants more for yourself. Because once, I think, we've talked about this idea of kind of opening that Pandora's box. I think once you open the door to that, it's very hard to ignore it. And and some people say to me often, they'll go, well, do you think I want too much? Is it work's just meant to be work? Or, oh, it's just a job. That's another narrative we hear a lot of. And I sit there with them and go, I'd like to believe you deserve more than that. I like to deserve that you deserve to feel happier than that. You have to have the courage to believe that you deserve that and to act accordingly with whatever that looks like. But I think we all deserve that, no?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the tragic bit of it. Like, that makes me really sad that there's elements of it where I'm guilty of that, and I'm sure you've been guilty of it in the past, where you don't believe that. And a phrase that a friend of mine, Sam, who's been on the show a couple of times now, that he says, and he's just basically tattooed it on my brain, is without hope you cannot cope. Like,
Mm, I
and
love that.
I think for me, like, and this is very, very, this is all happening very live as well, which has been the motto for the podcast, this series. There's a lot of live thinking going on.
I love that.
But, like, for me, I had this, there's these parts of you that, you want to make that change. You want to honor that part of you that wants more, whether that's in terms of happiness, whether it's in terms of whatever that might be. It might be, let's go with my example of, I want to work with people on a much deeper level than one squat, two protein.
Mm,
The conversations that, like, I just wanted that instantly. So I crashed out. I flipped out and was an absolute nightmare to be around for quite a while. Being really flippant, being really, sad and like Debbie Downer. And it's a hard loop to get yourself back off of. And I think there's an element,
mm,
I'm probably still maybe in a bit of a hangover of that.
mhm,
But all that is a conversation to be like, okay, we can't have that now.
mm,
What steps do I need? Like, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, but what steps can I start putting in place now, rather than panic, flip the table, burn the. I always think of that meme where it's like the guy is sat on the table and they're just he's saying I'm fine and the whole house
to
is
be
on
fun.
fire.
Yep.
I've got a keynote where that is one of my slides, and I'm like that, and yeah, like, it's one of those things of, like, you can't have it all, and you can't have it quickly, and that move that these, to get to where you want to be, to get the outcome that you want, it might take a few moves, it might take a few things. And there's a really weird, a couple of months ago, that's actually quite a while ago now, I went back to my old gym that I used to work at, and one of my old colleagues came up to me, and he's like, "Mate, like, how's things?" We're having a chat, and I can almost tell that he wanted to say something, and I was kind of
Yeah.
sort of like, gave him the space. I'm like, "What?" Like, almost like, come on, just like spit it out. Like, you clearly want to say something, like, not in like an aggressive word, like, you clearly want to say,
Yeah, yeah.
just hit me, mate. Like, I'm all ears. And he says, "There's a bit of advice I wanted to give you when you were before you left, and I didn't know how to do it and how to verbalize it, but it came to me the other day, and I wanted to tell you." And I'm like, "Okay," like, I'm getting worried. I'm like, "Come on, spit it out, spit it out." And it was like, you're trying to do the move in one, trying to win the game of chess in one move, which you can't do. There's a little bit of this manipulation is maybe not the right word, but bit of jouer le jeu move,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like there's some moving pieces, and yeah, you might have to be like, I might have to sacrifice a couple of pawns, which would be a couple of weekends doing this course. It might be a couple of late nights editing the podcast for me, which I have done. I don't like doing it, but fundamentally it's on my head to do it. So I could just not do it and see how that
Yeah.
gets me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But
My
sorry, go on.
No, no, well, what I was gonna do is my dad gave me really similar advice to that, but, like, earlier in my career. So my dad, for context, is a surgeon, and he always and when I started work, I was like, "Right, how am I gonna get promoted?" Like, immediately from day one. I was like, I think I should get promoted." And I was like, now I'm like, "You dig." But he said to me at the time, he was like, "It is better always to arrive when you are ready." And what he meant by that, and he put it in the context of his work, he was like, "If you think, if I'm doing an operation, I want to be really sure that I know what I'm doing before I start that process." Because he said, there is nothing worse than getting in that room and me being unprepared, because the consequences of that are huge. And so he said, "Yeah, it means I can't go do brain surgery tomorrow. What I've got to do is years of watching and learning and slowly building up to get there, because I will have a much better experience when I get there." And it's a similar thing in when we think about making any type of change, of sometimes, as you say, there are stepping stones that you have to take to get there. And sometimes it would be, I often talk to clients about change is like a river. Feels scary when you stand on one side and just hope that all you can do is just jump and hope you land on the other side. It's much less scary if you're putting in those stepping stones, and by that we mean action, to take you across the river. And they're littler jumps. You still have to jump, it will still feel a little bit scarier. But you will get there, but it will be a process, and you will guarantee that you land on the other side with your feet being dry. And what happens with these things, I think, is sometimes we go, "I want to solve the chess game in one move," and we might not be completely prepared for what happens as a result of that. And suddenly we're in a room where we didn't have the skill set to be there. We've taken on an opportunity that's too big. And actually, that's when we then panic and we can boomerang back into the life that we had before, because we basically move through that kind of comfort zone, stretch zone into the panic zone and go, "Ah, too far, panic, come back." And actually, there's something really to be said of going, actually, small incremental changes. I asked you that question about patience earlier. That's partly where some of that thinking comes from, is it requires patience to go, right, I'm going to make my dream happen. I have to do this slowly. I'm going to make change happen. I have to do this slowly because I have to keep my keep my life intact alongside it. Unfortunately, that's being a responsible adult.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. It isn't 0 or 100. There are quite literally 99 other things you could do between here and there. You just have to allow yourself the space to know that if you do that, you'll get to 100, and you'll get there a lot quicker than just being staying stood at 0, going, "Why am I not there yet?" Essentially.
definitely. And I think one of my biggest challenges moving into that, into like corporate or employed career,
Mm,
coming from the wonderful world of being self-employed. Now, don't get me wrong, the reasons were definitely the right reasons to do it, but
mm.
you come from being like, well, I'm going to completely change the way we do it with absolutely no pushback right now,
Yep, watch me go.
and watch me go. And there were times where, if I want to increase my salary, cool. All I need to do is basically like, okay, well, what am I marketing? What do I need to put in my marketing funnel to make that, to start to make that move? Like, and there were situations where, obviously lag effects and everything along those lines, where, there were weeks where, you make enough sales to add over £1,000 of revenue to your business each, recurring for multiple months minimum. And that's great. That's really fun. That's the bit of it that works really, really well. But, moving into that thing there, that was one of the things that, around patience and like patience in career and stuff like that, that was such a big challenge. Was kind of having to have that patience and slow down and be like, okay, but we got to work. There's a way of doing it. There's a way of playing a game, or whatever you want to call it, especially like coming off that wonderful world of being like, well, what I say goes, I do this, I do a bit of everything, to being like, no, this is your lane, you need to stay in that lane.
Mm,
And it takes time. And I think like I love that what one of the common themes that you said here is like coming out with like that patience. And I think that's so important in the wider picture, definitely. And on the internet especially, there are so many of these like conflicting opinions around you need to maximize your time now, go and do it now, quit your job and move to Bali now. Yeah, but it's also understanding that like, live for today.
mm.
But there is the other side of that where you have got to kind of play the game and take the time and do those kind of like development hours, learn those lessons. Sometimes learn them the hard way where it feels a bit hard, you get a bit egg on your face and you're like, Christ, I don't want to go into the office today.
Yeah, I think people think that making change sustainably makes it look like you're not doing anything at all.
Yes.
And that's not true, but it's not shiny. It's not shiny. It's not shiny. And it's also, I think that's, and I'm aware of the deep irony of someone who makes content. But social media, there's a good chunk of what happens on social media isn't real. Those people who quit their life and go, oh, I'll figure it out. They will have so much happening outside of that you don't see. And obviously, we all know comparison is the thief of joy, but I think social media is an incredible thing because it shows us possibilities, but it doesn't ever give you the full picture. And so I think there is something sometimes where, and I see this particularly with clients, of if they're doing sustainable, measured, practical action, and they do that, but they focus on getting 1% better every week, the compound of that leads to a much happier life than trying to jump 20%, 50%, 100% better all in one go. Because often, as human beings, we are wired to be risk averse. So what happens is either that jump is too far and it just doesn't work, or it does work, but because we are naturally risk averse, we have a horrible time getting there. And does that then make it worth it? I don't know. Because part of this process and part of growth, I think, as human beings, is every day trying to find something to enjoy in the everyday.
Yeah.
And that might mean that part of this is done slightly slower, but that doesn't mean you're not doing
Yeah.
anything.
Maybe taking a bit more of the scenic route.
Yeah. You'll never know what you learn along the way. You'll see different things, you'll become a different person, you'll meet different people. Every time you have a conversation with someone, you read something, you watch something, you are adding to your knowledge bank. It's a knowledge coin that goes in that piggy bank that you will use to make the change and make informed decisions. And that means that there's worth in absolutely everything you do. I think people beat themselves up when they go, I want to do, we've all done it. Think about New Year's resolutions, right? We all go, I'm going to lose a stone in January. And then they don't. And then they feel like shit. And then suddenly they're eating a bag of M&Ms on the 23rd of January or whatever the day. I think it's the 19th of January is the quitting day on average. But it happens with careers as well. Everyone goes, right, I'm going to apply for 95,000 jobs and I'm going to do something totally different. And they go at it with extremes, which I back themselves with because that's that feeling of motivation. But because they don't have the foundational knowledge of building that discipline system and having that patience with themselves, they then fall off and then they feel worse. And part of my responsibility as a coach is to help them do it in a measured way so that they actually get there. But sometimes it looks slightly unglamorous and unshiny.
And you have perfectly worked on to kind of the last point I wanted to talk about. But before we kind of get onto that, I love the analogy of like putting the coin in the piggy bank of knowledge. But like I think like it doesn't have to be like positive, if that makes sense.
Mm,
I hate him
yeah.
via here's not what to do. You might see an altercation and how someone deals with it, and you're like, that's what not to do.
Mm, mm, mm.
And they're so valuable too. I'm sure we could have all been in there, either been on the receiving end of or experienced or been in the vicinity of situations, and you're just like, that's a what not to do. I would never do that. Like
Yeah.
they're so valuable. Like I've seen people get absolutely berated and made to look really stupid in front of people. And how's that like? I'm a big believer in like, how's that going to make them perform better? But
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
secondly, like there's so much to that as well.
I think so. But I think you have to have the self-reflection to be able to unlock that. I think that's the key with all of this, right? Is I think what the world is fast. We live busy lives. We all have a lot on our plates. I think with all that knowledge, to make the most of it, you also have to pause and create those spaces to be able to go, okay, what didn't work about that? What am I going to learn from that? And obviously, my part of my job is creating that space for people. But I think anyone can do that. People shouldn't need a me, if I'm honest. Like, but there's discipline within that. There's creating that space to do that, and that's how you'll always get the most of it. Like, you can learn something every single day if you create the space to actually think about it and reflect on it and find that for yourself.
Definitely. And kind of the last point I wanted to go through with you as well, and you perfectly walked it on to the topic. But how do, like, a question I often ask myself, or
Mm.
something I think about, and I'm like, this is quite overwhelming, around the idea of like, I've got everything on my plate. I've got, the full time, and you get so caught up in the day to day that how
Mm.
do you have that time and energy, which I think is another thing, to change the life or make the changes that you feel that you need to across life?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
addressing that?
Yeah, I have a very practical answer on that, I think, which is that we all are very excited by this idea of change, and it's interesting because if you listen back to this conversation, you might think that that's not the tone of this, which actually isn't true. I want everyone to dream big. I want everyone to be excited. I want everyone to be able to hold the most expansive version of themselves and believe that that is possible because it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And so with that, what I always encourage people to do is dream big, have that space, vision board it out, go and journal it, write it, believe it, do whatever you need to do, put it somewhere that you can see it, think big. But where that then needs to be worked on, and how you then make that change alongside a busy life, is you take that and you break that down into going, okay, what are the steps I need to take to make that happen? And then within that, when you've written that first list, go back in and write the micro steps that are in between all of those steps. So essentially, if we're going 1 to 5, what are the decimal point steps in between that? Break it down smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you have something really easy that you could be ticking off. What we would then do, if you worked with me, what we then do is go, right, look at your average week. How much of that could you do? And it's interesting because people's initial instincts are going in the same way. If we think about that, going to the gym, New Year's resolution, they're going to go, I'm 5 days a week. So people will say, if I'm working with job search, for example, people will go 8 hours. I will do 8 hours of job searching a week. And we sit there and we break down their week and we go, actually, if you have, if you're playing football on a Wednesday night, you work a 9 to 5, you've also got all of this happening, you're going away on a stag do at the weekend. Is that feasible? And that's the most important question to ask. You go, okay, how much can I think that I can give this? Then I want to go, okay, what's the feasible amount? You can always do more, but what is that minimum commitment to it? And that can only, if that's only an hour a week, fine. But if you've got those small things that you can keep coming back to, and you say, I do an hour every Thursday night, you'd be amazed. If you do that consistently, again, we're back on that compounding effect, that will compound over time. And it's about having that awareness and that acceptance of yourself, of doing 1 hour a week for 4 weeks is 4 hours. Great. So much can happen in 4 hours. And that's a much more productive use of time than going, I'm going to do 8 and then you only do 2 and you waste the rest of the time feeling shit about yourself because you said I was going to do this, and all your mental resource goes into beating yourself up. So it's dream big, write those into actions, make them smaller, and find what your minimum commitment is that you can do every week and stick to that. And just prove to yourself that you can commit to that. And if you prove that to yourself, you'll learn to trust yourself. And when you do that, it will compound over time and you will change your life.
That's a mic drop there. Like, the amount of times that I used to be the king of this. Like, I get so overexcited after an event or a coaching call or a podcast or whatever, and you just leave fueled off this energy, and it's certainly I can talk about it from obviously like a guy's perspective. You just absolutely juice off this energy, and you're like, God, I'm going to just commit, and I'm really set stupid goals like this. Next 3 months is mine. I'm going to make it. Blah, blah, blah. It's so overexcited, and then there's just not the hardware and the systems and the like true intention of like beyond that red mist of like, oh God, I'm so excited. This is going to be amazing. Like, it is what you were saying there about, okay, well, that I can sit here and just kind of like just buzzing off this energy. But if I don't truly actually do anything with it or commit the hours,
Yeah.
it's like you said, even if it's 30 minutes a week, okay, yeah, you end up picking up 2 hours over the course of a month, but it's a hell of a lot better than just kind of being this
Yeah.
Tasmanian devil ball of energy where you're bashing off the walls and you don't ever actually get anything done. It's
No.
about obviously slowing down and being a lot more kind of like methodical, like, but it's also really like it's boring. Like boring. This is all really boring, but boring is boring, but boring pays the bills.
Yeah, it does. It does. And that feeling, right? Because what we're talking about here is that difference between motivation and discipline. So motivation is a feeling. Motivation is like all our other feelings. It's feeling happy, it's feeling sad, it's feeling frustrated. It's important to recognize that because motivation, like all our feelings, are transient. They come and they go. They will turn up with full force. We feel them deeply, deeply, and then they dip. And actually, what we're thinking about when it comes to making changes doesn't really matter what you do when you feel motivated. You probably have all the ideas then. That's absolutely brilliant. But change comes when you are being disciplined. And that is about what you can actually commit to. And building that discipline muscle is the most important thing to have in your toolkit if you want to change your life. I don't care what you do when you're motivated. I want you to show yourself what you can do if you're being disciplined. Because if you do that, that's the foundation that you're going to prove to yourself that change can happen, that you deserve to make change happen. And if you believe those two things, you're already halfway there. You just then keep getting to do the fun things, which is actually making your life feel better. But you have to start from a place of going, actually, how do I show up for myself and how do I make that feel meaningful to me? And that normally is small, consistent, patient steps over time, and you will get to where you want to be.
Amazing. And what an incredible place to end. You've fully mic dropped that. I don't know how. So where can people find you? What you're working on? What's next?
Yeah, love that. So, as you say, I work as a career coach, specialize in working with young professionals to help them feel in control of their careers. I do that through my careers consultancy, which is called What Happens Now. The mission of that is to help to make sure that every single young person has the tools they need to answer those questions in life when they sit there and they basically go, shit, what happens now? Do that in two ways. I do that through one-to-one coaching, so you can come and work with me and be my client. I do that by working with organizations and helping them teach the young people that they work with the skills they need to actually build a fulfilling career, because career development is a skill in itself that none of us seem to get taught. So I try and plug that gap. And then beyond that, I make a shed load of free content, which you can go and follow across Instagram, TikTok, and the handle is at whathappensnow.co. And that's the plug.
And that'll be in link in bio and all of that good stuff. Not link in bio, link in the show notes, whatever's below this video.
We know what we meant.
We know what we mean. Yeah, I'm sure we're all on the same page here. I'm sure you can work out where that is. Thank you so much. I've loved our conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Some,
Yeah, tangents and all.
but I feel like either way, I've had a lovely time, and I hope you have too.
Yeah, it's been an absolute joy. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.